Welcome back to War of the Realms. When we last left off, the 9 realms had invaded Midgard, deciding to make Earth the battlefield. And Thor was missing, Loki had died, and the Avengers were wondering, how are they going to stop all of these creatures from the 9 realms taking over the planet of Earth? We left this off at the ending of issue 1, and now we're going to move into Thor issue 12 to continue the overall storyline, telling you what is happening in the tie-ins. If you're wondering where you are, this is the Comicstorian channel, and here we bring you audio dramas, allowing you to catch up on the lore of your favorite video games, comic books, and movies. I hope you enjoy our presentation. Loki suddenly sits up, last remembering his own death, but the smell of death and blood are now around him. His head pounding, confusion filling him as he looks around. The bodies of dead trolls and elves surrounding him in the smoky battlefield. I hope I didn't do this, he mutters, staring at the carnage. You didn't. A voice calls from behind him, forcing him to turn. I did. The ancient Loki smiles. He's larger than Loki can remember, being his body is covered in armor, and he's carrying a great club. Oh, bloody hell, he mutters. It's gonna be a worse morning than he thought, the trickster god cursing as his younger self steps forward. What do you want, you cheap Viking conjurer? Yet his younger self merely laughs, commenting how Loki hates to be confronted by his true self. The two stand amongst the carnage of war, with Loki asking his younger self if he was responsible. Aye, not bad for an afternoon's work. It certainly did the job. It made me smile. He grins at the sight of the older Loki's disgust, and Loki stares down into the blade of a sword, piercing a man's eye. All of this for his own amusement, all to take his mind off the troubles of Thor. Suddenly, he turns to the sound of a cart being pushed behind him. Look out! Corpse burner at work! The young voice calls. Turning, he sees a young dark elf pushing his cart towards a roaring fire, hearing the words of the master calling to a young Meleketh. Loki is stunned to hear the name of the Accursed One, and he turns to his younger self. Who gives a Dorse fart what his name is? He'll just be some dark elf war slave. He'll likely be dead before the end of the day. The younger trickster snorts, seemingly not caring who this Meleketh is. Yet, Loki knew that he wouldn't. He watches the young elf turn his cart over, tossing another body onto the fire. He knew that he would live a long life of horror and hardship, a life that would leave him frightfully strong and scarred, forever accursed, and eventually, the man who started the War of the Realms, the man who has invaded Earth. Horror fills Loki's face as he realizes that Meleketh will never forget the fruits of a war that he grew up with, a war that he started. By the gods, it's my fault, I created Meleketh, Loki finally realizes, looking at this former self, this past of his. He runs forward, calling out to the young boy. He can stop this all from happening. He can be taken away from all of this. And upon reaching the young elf, Loki merely passes through him, tripping and stumbling on a rock, turning to himself. What did you do to me? He demands. Yet the true question is, what did Loki do to them? Don't you remember? You got us killed! Young Loki snorts, and images of being devoured by his father, Lofri, fill his mind. The feeling of the teeth grinding into him suddenly overpower him. I was eaten by Lofri, he remembers. I'm dead, I'm in hell. You are my hell, he mutters, turning to his younger self, but his younger self once again snorts. This isn't hell. Although you might wish it was before your visits are through. Anger fills Loki, and he demands that his younger self end this, launching at him with magic flowing from his hands, but the younger Loki merely waves his hand, launching the older one away. Loki now stands in Jotunheim, watching as his father, Laufey, rages and shouts about someone leaving flowers at his doorstep. His axe slices through the head of another ice giant, with icy blood raining down as the head bounces to a stop in front of Loki. I suppose the ice roses were a poor choice, but in my defense, I never celebrated Father's Day before, he mutters at the decapitated head. Loki watches as his father continues to rage, killing more of their giant brethren. This happened weeks ago. There's nothing he could do to stop it. I wouldn't feel bad if I were you. They're frost giants. It's sort of their way of life, the child version of himself calls out from behind. Loki just glares at himself. He's already met the ancient Viking version of himself, and now he's dealing with the present, or at least the present that should have been. The child Loki shrugs, but Loki continues to glare. He didn't want this. He didn't want to be the villain again. He did what he had to do to save Lady Freya. He stabbed her in the back to save her. The images of him slicing his mother in the back with his poisoned dagger fill Loki's mind, and he stares in shock at his own hands. Finally, he turns back to Child Loki, glaring at him again. And I would do it again! He snarls, but the child simply shrugs. I have to hand it to you, Loki. When you tell a lie, you sure stick with it. They stand now in his room, surrounded by a pile of useless things. Loki traded him away, traded the child Loki for a mouse hole in his father's castle. Tell me this isn't the biggest blunder you've ever made. The child turns, angrily glaring at the older version of himself. Loki doesn't answer, instead staring down at a photo of Lady Freya, his mother. They say the Norns are dead, but our fates are up to us, he whispers. Yet it doesn't feel that way. It never felt that way to me. He turns back to himself, ordering himself to take him away from this place. Let him die in peace! Child Loki merely shrugs and sneers. You think you're here because of me? You're here because of you. You're here because even in death, you can't help but admire yourself. And with a smile, the child waves his hand and casts Loki away. He sees himself now, his eyes blackened by dark power as he pierces Ego, the living planet. Behold Loki, the Necro God, the All-Butcher! He screams out, with Loki floating off in the distance, watching himself. This can't be real. I'm already dying. This is a lie. This must be. But the dark Loki, the Necro God Loki, turns, an evil grin twisting on his face, floating at Loki, smiling. Lie? Why would I tell a lie? There's no one left to listen. But Loki pushes him away, trying to lash out with his magics. He won't let it end this way. I will not be the greatest monster who ever lived. But the black tendrils lash out, wrapping around his limbs, and the dark Loki leans in. He wants to know. You're not the ultimate Loki. I am. He launches Loki away as he flies through space to find his brother, and he spins in the void, fear washing over him. This cannot be real. I'm dying. I was eaten by my father. I can stop this. All of this. He shouts, closing his eyes, concentrating. He can end this. And then he opens his eyes, and a scream escapes his lips. He floats, and the acids of Laufey's stomach are burning through his skin, his arms floating by his face, and he screams again, realizing, why am I alive? Please, by all the gods, Loki must die! Next, we bring you the Asguardians of the Galaxy, number 18, the continued tie-in series to this story. Shards of the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge of the gods, float through space, drifting gently away from the floating tomb of Asgard. A portal opens, emitting a large spaceship that lands on the former home of the gods. With a steaming hiss, the ramp lowers, revealing Angela, Scourge, Thunderstrike, Throg, Urzel, the Dwarf, and Annabelle, the Asguardians of the Galaxy. Quickly, the team begins to move through the destruction of the former city. Angela, does the home of the gods always look like this? Thunderstrike asks, looking at the ruins. The warrior of heaven reveals that Asgard is but a shadow of its former glory. Ready your mace, Thunderstrike, she warns him, and they continue to move forward until Angela looks at their dwarf, questioning whether the Naglfar beacon is safe aboard the ship. Urzel waves his hand dismissively. It's locked aboard the ship, sealed in a vault, warded by fire and ice and a few mystic traps. Do not put your faith in your traps, dwarf. A powerful voice calls from behind them, and the team turns to see Heimdall stepping from beneath the shadows of the ship, carrying both the beacon and the fragment of the rainbow bridge that they use to power their ship. The Naglfar beacon is a powerful weapon that can aid us in the battles to come, the god nods. And I'm gathering all of the shards of the rainbow bridge. Heimdall informs Angela of Malekith's army, of his forces marching on the final realm, marching on Earth. We need your sword, Odin's daughter, he tells her. Annabelle steps forward, concern on her face. Final realm? He's talking about Earth, she cries, and Thunderstrike steps forward, determination on his face. He has family and friends on Earth. Heimdall tells them of the battle, how the heroes of Earth fight to hold back the new lords of Midgard. I have gathered enough energy from the Rainbow Bridge to send you all back. And Angela extends her hand, motioning to the beacon, taking it from Heimdall's hands. It was crafted as a weapon of war. Give it to me and we will put it to use. Finally, Heimdall turns his unseeing eyes towards Annabelle Riggs, the Valkyrie. He begins to give her a warning of the future, yet she stops him. No offense, but I got friends on Earth who need my help, so maybe save the doom and gloom prophecies for later? Multicolored energy begins to surround them, and the team vanishes, leaving Heimdall alone in the tomb of the gods. In Manhattan, the battle has already begun, with the team quickly spreading among the other heroes, fighting against the forces of legend and myth. Spider-Man swings over the teams as Scourge and Urzel open fire on the Dark Elves. Thunderstrike swinging his mace, casting lightning, while Captain America fights giants. The shield bearer stops briefly, turning to the young Thunderstrike. I knew your father, young man. I think he'd be proud of you joining us today. Kevin appreciates the words, but he's still worried about the rest of his family. And that's when Spider-Man swings by. Hey, we're evacuating people as fast as we can, kid. Is that a frog in a Thor costume? The battle rages on, yet there seems to be no end in sight for Malekith's forces. Annabelle drops in using the power of her Nova helmet to save the people who can't escape. But the power dims and fades and she is forced to run. As the giant chases them, the energy begins to crackle around her as her image alters and changes. Valkyrie has joined the fight. The angels of heaven join the battle, and Angela clashes swords against their leader, cursing her for joining forces with Malekith as the battle rages on around them. Scourge struggles to his feet, arrows sticking from his back. You gonna live? Punisher grunts, and the executioner nods. So Frank Castle tosses him a rifle. Then take a gun. The two stand together, firing into an army of dark elves. Above the battle, Throg, seeing a plume of fire rising from Central Park, leaps into the air, heading to the home of his people. Lightning cracks as he lands in the park, seeing the charred bodies of his former brothers, staring in sadness as the park burns around him. The fire imps come from a tree, screaming for death and pain. His small hand tightens on the hilt of his hammer, and the rings begin to fall. Surprise begins to fill the imps' faces as they look up, just in time to see the lightning strike them. And with that, the battle continues. Stand together, Asguardians! Do not falter! Angela cries, launching herself at a bog mammoth. No matter how many of Malekith's forces fall, though, there always seems to be more. Valkyrie flies in on her Pegasus, her sword slashing through the invading force, yet she begins to shift as she feels Annabelle taking over again. I'm sorry, Valkyrie, but I know you'll never leave the fight and there's something I have to do. The young woman apologizes as she points the winged horse away from the battle. Knowing that his friend may need help, Thunderstrike rushes to her aid, with Scourge calling for him to crush any elves that you see along the way. The remaining warriors turn as more enemies begin to converge upon them. We might be down half our team, but the enemy forces don't seem interested in letting us regroup. Urzel comments, loading his weapon. A few blocks away, Annabelle flies in, seeing her lover Ren twirling around a group of dark elves, her dancing ribbon slashing them to pieces. The flying horse bowls through the rest of the elves, scattering them. Quickly, the young woman dismounts, rushing over to embrace her love. But before the two of them can kiss, Annabelle begins to disappear, drifting away as if on a breeze. Thunderstrike arrives just in time to see her go and hear Ren call her name. Annabelle now stands before a collection of Valkyrie warriors, armor shining, swords drawn. One points the tip of her blade at her. Where is your counterpart, Brunhilde, leader of the Valkyrie? She demands. Now we bring you the War of the Realms, Issue 2. Greenridge Village, a large crowd has gathered outside of the Sanctum Sanctorum as the battle rages elsewhere in the city. Everyone stares slightly confused at the glowing green spectral basset hound that floats before them. Right this way, New York! You know the evacuation protocols, no pushing! He yells to the crowd as they begin to enter the Sanctorum. Don't worry, there's plenty of space for everybody. The safe room can hold a couple million full-grown humans, he continues. Move along, no staring at the ghost dog, just follow the talking snakes. The young woman next to him tries to help. Hey girl, what up? You evacuate here often? One of the snakes asks a passerby. But as the people begin to push inside, Jane Foster steps out. The ghost dog floats to her, questioning whether the Asgardians have been evacuated. Yes, Bats, but there's still another longboat coming from the Bronx, she informs him. The dog nods and continues to talk, yet Jane isn't listening anymore. She can feel something calling to her from the battlefield. Elsewhere, the bodies begin to litter the ground around a familiar van, and a group of dark elves stumble and fall away. He's just one man! Why can't you useless mongrels bring him down? The leader screams, stepping forward, yet the answer is simple. The dark elves have a natural weakness to iron, and the Punisher has an endless supply. Frank begins to open fire, shooting a burst shot into the dark elves as another tries to sneak up behind him, but the elf merely gurgles as the 3 adamantium claws pierce his chest. Wolverine, heard you were dead. Nah, just really drunk for a long time. How have things been, Frank? I'm reloaded. Frank nods. Good catching up. Frank aims his weapon and he opens fire as Wolverine charges into the fight. Meanwhile, Captain America dashes up the stairs of an apartment building, ordering the civilians to get to their evacuation points as he charges past them. Knowing that he's high enough, he leaps through a window, smashing into the Frost Giant's head, shield first. The massive enemy stumbles and falls, shaking the ground around them, with Cap landing, rolling back on his feet. Somebody find me another giant, I'm going back up! Above the city, Iron Man careens through the endless valleys of steel, concrete, and glass as the warriors of heaven chase him. T'Challa, could we use the teleporter at Avengers Mountain to get out of here? He asks. Sif launches herself at a swamp mammoth, and the Black Panther doesn't even slow his attack against the fire imps as he informs Stark there's something crashing all of the global networks. I can't raise the mountain. Elsewhere, amongst all of the destruction, Dario Agger, head of Roxxon, laughs, congratulating his employees over the phone as he drinks coffee. I have a spell, but it comes at a heavy price, Doctor Strange calls, as Curse wraps his hands around his throat.
Still, I would have it done in 5 minutes, but I'm having some performance issues right now.
Elsewhere in the battle, the rest of the heroes continue to fight on. Okay, big and fiery. You must be from hell, right? Spider-Man quips as he leaps and flips from Cinder. I'm the Queen of Muspelheim. Hold still now, she bellows. I'm so confused. Is there a map around here somewhere? And he leaps again. Ulick collides with She-Hulk, complaining about how he has to fight the green half-wit. At least yours has meat on its bones, Enchantress states, looking bored as she casts spells at Ghost Rider. Robbie Reyes tries to block her attacks with his Hellfire, and simply responds,
Keep it up, lady. You're gonna piss off my car, and you wouldn't like it when my car's pissed off.
Suddenly, the Enchantress is knocked away as a Viking longship rams into her, with Jane Foster leaping clear of it, a sword in her hand as she surveys the battle. What in God's name are you doing here? Lady Freya cries as she rushes over. The two dodge clear of a rushing ice giant as the battle continues on. The air is suddenly filled with the sound of a rolling horn, echoing throughout the battle and the city, giving everyone pause. The two warriors look to the skies as an army of Valkyrie riding upon winged horses pour forth from a rainbow portal. At the head of the charge flies Odin, armed with his spear, riding a black stallion, fire snorting from its nostrils.
Sound the horn so that the whole damned realm can know that the god of gods has arrived, and that hell comes with him.
Odin rides forward, his body glowing with the Odin force as he pierces straight through a frost giant's chest, bursting out the other side covered in gore.
If Malekith wants a war, by my beard we'll give it to him.
Brunhilde rides forth, her blade slashing giants as she comes, with Jane rushing to her, sliding on the back of her Pegasus. You're strangely familiar, mortal. Do I know you? She questions. Jane nods, telling her to picture her with a hammer in her hand and it'll come. Now take me to Malekith! Odin pushes back the lords of Midgard, finally floating down to his wife. You look like hell, husband, she informs him. The king shrugs off the comment.
I'm as strong as a builder snipe.
Freya hangs her head, sadness filling her as she tells Odin of Loki's death. In that moment, the king of the Frost Giants pushes through the smoke and the flames of destruction,
and anger fills Odin as he wheels his horse, energy crackling around him.
Yet he is slow and the giant smashes him hard into a wall. Brunhilde and Jane ride through battle, their swords cutting through the forces of heaven quickly. Realization dawns on the Valkyrie that she rides with the former goddess of thunder. I thought you'd be more blonde. They see Malekith riding his bog tiger in the distance, yet Jane will not be the one to end him. The Pegasus tilts, throwing Jane onto a rooftop. You've already fought enough battles to last a lifetime, Jane Foster. Go and enjoy life. You've earned it. She orders her swooping away. Jane turns, though, shocked at the sight of the vampire hunter Blade, locked in combat with 3 war witches. She rushes forward, her blade clipping one of the witches long enough to throw off their spell. Elsewhere in the battle, though, Doctor Strange can feel the magical interference lift. His eyes glow as he lifts from the ground and he begins to cast his spell. By the beard of Vashante, let the purple veil be rent asunder. I, Doctor Strange, will pay the soul toll for all who pass. A massive portal opens. Blue tendrils begin to snake outward into the city. Malekith and his forces converge on the portal, wishing for no one to escape the war. Yet Brunhilde swoops in, crying for aid. Valkyries, protect the portal at all costs, she orders as she rides straight for the Dark Elf. Malekith, meet Dragonfang. Meet your doom, Dark Elf. She hisses as their blades lock, yet Malekith merely smiles. All I see is a dead woman on a horse. Throughout the city, the tendrils snake out, pulling all of the heroes and civilians alike into the portal. Stephen, your spell is too strong, Captain America cries as he's being dragged in, when suddenly all of the heroes stand in the war room of the Avengers Tower. We have to go back. The fight isn't over, Jane calls as she rushes forward, but Freya disagrees as she drags her wounded husband into the room. Malekith's forces are too strong. They need her son. They need Thor. They need to stop Malekith's Black Bifrost in Svartalheim. They need to end Roxxon interference with the global networks. Captain Marvel steps forward. This is war. She will fight it in the trenches with every soldier that she can find. I can think of no better captain for the job, Captain America tells her. They will need to reach the other realms, yet Heimdall still cannot see. He won't know where to send them if they can't open up the Rainbow Bridge. Freya steps forward. They all have a mission. In her absence, she names Jane Foster All-Mother of Asgard, yet Jane is not listening. Tears fill her eyes as she looks up at the war room monitors. The news shows the massacre of New York. The bodies of the fallen Valkyrie are scattering. Pegasus blood is filling the streets as the Dark Elves continue to wrestle with them. Yet the battle is not over. On a pile of bodies, blood flowing from dozens of Dark Elf daggers sticking from her body, Brunhilde fights on. Is that all you elves got? My blade is far from dry, she screams. She turns, glaring at the sea of her enemies. Malekith, stop hiding behind your magics and... But her words, they are cut off as shock fills her face, falling to her knees, finally staring down at the glowing blade that is piercing her chest. Malekith stands behind her, a smile pulling his lips to his ears as he rears back with his blade, and he swings. And that concludes the War of the Realms, Issue 2. I hope you're enjoying our method of covering the War of the Realms, bringing you the important side bits, the important stories, letting you know what is going on across all of the realms as this battle is raging on. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to keep up with the War of the Realms right here at the Comicstorian channel, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Comicstorian. Thank you for your time and your support, and I'll see you next time right here.